So what makes a great bird photograph, or what makes some photographs better than others? How do we actually go about improving our photography? In this video, what we'll do is we'll look at some of the techniques we can use to help us improve our bird photography, the aim being to create better bird photographs. What we'll do is we'll look at lighting, we'll look at the background to images, we'll look at composition, we'll look at it from a bird's eye view. I'll talk about what I class as classic images, and I'll give you some top tips along the way. So let's go. Top tip: get to know your camera equipment. It's really important that you fully understand how your camera and your lenses operate. I'm not going to talk about specific brands. I did a previous video quite recently on how to choose lenses for wildlife photography. That would be quite useful to check out. But it really is important that you fully understand how your camera and your lens work. One thing that I would recommend is that if you can set back button focusing on your camera, is to do so. It's a fantastic way, and I think the vast majority of top photographers use back button focusing, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube for that. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is lighting. Now, the Greek meaning of the word photography actually means painting with light, and I can remember when I first started photography. My brother James is a very good landscape photographer. He told me, he said, "Kevin, it's all about the light." And it's so true. It's all about the light. So what we have to do before we actually take a shot is we need to actually assess the light that's available to us. Knowing the direction and the colour of the light allows you to predict what effect that light is going to have on your images. There are 4 things that you need to consider regarding the light that's available. First thing is the actual type of light, and that really revolves around what's known as the golden hours, and I'll talk a little about that a little bit later on. You need to think about the direction of the light. Are you going to have to move? It's not like working in a studio environment where you're completely in control. Wildlife photography, you're out in the countryside, you are not really in control of the light, but there are things that you can do. As I said, film during the golden hours, direction of light, think about moving. Colour temperature is really about using, I would recommend that you use auto white balance, and then that means that when you go to post-processing, you can change the colour temperature to the light to what you think is the best. The actual mood of the photographs and the images that you're going to take are often dictated by the light. As we said at the beginning, it's all about the light. Now, the easiest way to get really good images is by shooting with the sun behind your back. However, if you shoot with the sun coming from either left or right, half the bird will be well lit, while the other half will be in the shadow. Now, there's nothing actually wrong with that, as long as you know what the end result is going to be. Previously, I did a 3-part video of exposure, and that was to do with the exposure triangle, camera modes. Now, when it comes to lighting, understanding the camera modes in your camera and how the camera will react in light is very important, and that was part 2. So that's the one that I would recommend for you to watch. And the other one in part 3 was exposure compensation, again to do with light. And I'll leave a link to that playlist at the end of this video. Top tip: time of the day. What's the best time of day to go out and photograph birds? Probably there are 2 real best times during the day to do that, and that is at sunset and sunrise, which is known as the golden hours. That time of the day often offers you the best light available for wildlife photography. The fact is, you just need to get out there. And as the saying goes, the early bird catches the worm. So, time of day, the golden hours. Next thing we're going to look at is the background, and it's probably one of the most important parts of a bird image is the background. And by following a simple approach, you can blur out the background, and that in turn makes your bird actually pop out. You only get one true plane of focus in an image, known as the depth of field. Now, telephoto lenses come into their element due to their narrow angle of view, and combined with a narrow depth of field, you can blur out not only the background but the foreground also. What I want to do now is I want to have a look at this diagram. What we're really after is a wide aperture, and you're looking for a telephoto lens in the range of between 300 and 500 millimeters in focal length. Now, It's important to keep the camera as parallel to the subject as possible. Again, using that 300 to 500mm lens, that's going to give us that narrow angle of view and a shallow depth of field. The wide open aperture then allows us to blur out the background and also the foreground. Now, the distance, the minimal distance between you and the bird in the background should be roughly twice the distance from you to the bird it should be from the bird to the background. And the further the background is away from the bird, the blurrier your image should be. But again, you need to keep that camera as parallel as possible to your subject. Remembering, long lenses, shallow depth of field, keeping the camera parallel allows you to achieve that. Top tip, bird behaviour. When I first started out in bird photography, I used to photograph absolutely everything. And there's a classic saying about photographing birds on a stick. Now, there's nothing wrong with that to begin with, but what you're really trying to do in improving your bird photography is to be able to tell a story about what the bird is actually doing. And lots of birds have classic poses, and I'll talk about classic images later. But the more that you understand about bird photography gives you a better understanding of how to actually go out and target certain birds. Because you're not going to get a barn owl at 12 o'clock in the middle of a summer's day. And you need to understand when are the best times to actually go out and find specific birds. So understanding bird photography is a great step forward in improving your bird photography. Moving on to composition now. If you were to Google the word composition in photography, you'll get up to about 20 plus composition rules. I would advise you, if you're a beginner, to concentrate on only one rule, and that's the rule of thirds. To begin with, learn that, apply it, then once you're happy with using it, then I would advise you to then look at other ways of doing your composition. Also remember, rules can be broken, as you're about to find out. So, the rule of thirds. It consists of 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines, giving you a grid of 9 equal parts. Now, the intersecting lines create what is known as 4 power points. Now, by placing your subject or a key element of your subject on or near one of these power points gives you a balanced composition, as you can see in this picture of a long-tailed tit with the eye and the tail. Next we have what's known as leading lines. Leading lines in photography help to draw the viewer's eye effortlessly towards the main subject. And here you can see with this example of a waxwing eating a berry on a branch, you can see that the branch is the leading line, and that line leads you to the bird eating the berry. Leading lines. Next we have what's known as negative space. It's especially important in bird photography and especially in birds in flight photography. You should always look to leave room in your images that tells the viewer a story. So for instance, in this image of a barn owl hunting, you can see where the bird has come from and you can see the direction that it's going in, and there's enough negative space in the image to show the viewer that the bird is moving in that direction. Another aspect to the composition rules is what's known as symmetry. Symmetry in bird photography especially can be used to highlight birds and reflections, and I did a completely separate video on that, and again you'll find that in my playlists on how to photograph birds and reflections. So what you're trying to do with symmetry is, if you can capture an image with a bird head on and with good defined eyes, again symmetry can be displayed, as you can see in these pictures of the little owl. So to summarise composition, you have the rule of thirds. Keep it simple, learn about the rule of thirds, then once you're happy with it, then look at other rules for composition. Negative space, very important, especially in birds in flight. You need to leave enough space for the bird to look into or the bird to move into for birds in flight. Symmetry, especially important when you're looking at things like reflections. Top tip, camera support. In order to get sharp images, you have to make sure that your camera platform is stable to get the shots that you're after. The slower the shutter speed that you use, the more stable a platform you need. So whether it's a tripod, a monopod, a bean bag, a ground pod, or whether you're hand holding. I'm actually working on a video at the moment that's going to cover all of those aspects, and I hope to have that out quite soon. So you need to understand that the slower the shutter speed, the more stable a platform you need. So camera support, very important. The eyes and the head are probably the most important parts of a bird to get sharp in your images. For stationary birds, I would use a single focus point or eye detection, if you've got it, placed on the bird's eye. And modern day eye detection should nail it straight away. Can have some difficulties with very dark coloured headed birds with dark eyes. Getting to eye level often means having to get down low, especially with water birds. But the opposite can be said about birds in flight. And again, I did a separate video on how to photograph birds in flight, and you'll find that on my playlist. But it is achievable with good preparation and planning. I briefly want to talk about what's known as catch lights. And sometimes when a bird turns its head, you'll see that catch light. It's a light that reflects off the eye and it creates a highlight. And it's absolutely no coincidence that famous painters will always paint catch lights into their subject's eyes. Bird photography is no different. The eye is one of the most important features of a bird to focus onto. So you need to get down to eye level and you need to look for catch lights to make sure you get them into your images, because it really does make the bird pop out. And that's what it's all about, in getting those great images. Top tip, shoot in RAW. RAW files retain more detail and have a far higher dynamic range than JPEGs. That means that you can retain the details and the shadows and the highlights, making your images more vibrant and balanced. So choose to shoot RAW over JPEG. I've often been asked what's my best bird photograph, and my answer is always the same, and that is I haven't taken it yet. For me, the real challenge is to go out there and just to try and keep improving. I have favourite photographs, but I don't have best photographs, because my aim is always to try and better my favourite images. That's my approach to it. For some birds, there can only really be one type of image that you should be looking to try and get that stands out from others, and I call these classic images. And I'm going to talk you through what I call 3 classic images. The first one is a nuthatch. Here in the UK, the nuthatch is the only bird that you will see travelling downwards down a tree as it's looking for food. So the classic image you want of the nuthatch is the nuthatch facing down the tree trunk. And that's what I call a classic image. The next one is of the goldfinch. Goldfinch is one of our most colourful birds, as you can see from the pictures here. And the best place to get a picture of a goldfinch is actually on a teasel. Now, a teasel is like a wild weed here in the UK, and it's full of seeds. And goldfinches absolutely love them. And capturing a goldfinch feeding on a teasel, again, I call that a classic image. Yes, once you've got your record shots of your goldfinch and your nuthatch, you know, the birds on a stick, absolutely fine. Start trying to look for those classic images. And the last one I'll leave you with is a sparrowhawk. Again, this was a record shot of the sparrowhawk sitting, waiting to pounce. But actually, the sparrowhawk is well renowned for actually hunting and killing small birds and eating them. And that's the picture you're after. You know, as much as the blackbird will eat a worm, or the blue tit in this case here will eat a butterfly, it just so happens that the sparrowhawk eats small birds, and that to me is a classic image. So look to get your record shots, your birds on a stick, absolutely nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. But once you've done that, then look to try and get those classic images. Top tip, post-processing. If you're not at the moment doing post-processing of your images, it's the one way that you really will improve your bird photography. And it's an essential part of digital photography today in order to get the most out of your images. There's many platforms to choose from. I use DxO Pro and I use Lightroom. That's the 2 that I use, and I sometimes use Photoshop. But post-processing is vital to getting good, vibrant, eye-popping bird images. So what I want to do now is just leave you with some of my favourite bird images, and I hope you enjoy them. Okay, thanks for watching this edition of Kevin Hatley Photography and how you can go about improving your bird photography. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have filming the video, and I hope that the techniques and the tips that we've gone through will help you to achieve that aim. All I would ask is that if you've liked it, could you hit the like button? Could I also ask you to subscribe to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography? It's completely free, it doesn't cost anything, and what it does, it just allows me to improve the channel and get it out to more people so that I can share my knowledge and my experience with others. And that's what I love to do with this channel. So, until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.